welcome to another episode of Chick Chat Live. My name is Cornelia, and if you were wondering why we have a different set today, that's because we had to make accommodation for one of our studio guests. On the show today, we are talking about demystifying the ideals of the strong Black woman, and our hot topic of the day is sharing the responsibility of parental care. Joining me in the studio today is Dr. Carol Matthias O'Shea,
right,
educational psychologist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You're
I'm glad
welcome.
to be here.
Lexi Boahene. Okay, get my little Boahene. HR consultant,
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
And of course, superstar tech entrepreneur / software engineer, Farida Bedway. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so we have a new tradition on the show. I want you guys to pick a number between 2 and 12. And whoever gets the highest number gets to go first. So pick a number.
7.
4.
Da-da-da-da. 4. Well, that was your number. Well, Lexi, you're a strong Black woman, aren't you? A strong Black African woman, for that matter. Let me start by asking what that means to you. Because I think it's just a word that we just hear. Like, what does strong Black woman mean?
Precisely. I think we overuse it, like we overuse like many other words. But the realities that, are a woman that gets things done. Ish done. And I like to think that I'm that type of woman. And I would like to also think that everyone, on this panel is. So we get things done in a nutshell. We don't dilly-dally. We're not men where we have to think about things 110 times. No offense, guys.
The shade.
But we get things done, and we do it with with our heads held high. We do it with class and dignity. And then we celebrate it afterwards. So, yeah.
Do you think there's a cost to pay for doing, because it sounds like the strong Black woman, and I think there's a difference between the strong Black woman and the independent woman. I don't think that they're one and the same, but I think, part of being a strong woman is somewhat being able to be independent. But I think...
And then that has no, correlation with color.
No, I think it's just a general, we're not bringing, Black into it. We're just talking about a strong woman and an independent woman. But I think that a strong woman shoulders a little bit more because as a strong woman, you could be a mother, you could be single. As a strong woman, you could be a mother, wife, a carer for your parents. So do you think that because of the word strong, people sort of have a pressure to sort of stick within what that strength means, especially as we were raised by African, strong, African women.
Yeah.
Do you think that sometimes, where does it get to the point where, okay, you don't have to be this strong?
Yeah, I think just two facets to that. So, I look at my nieces, and I'm a mother myself, and I look at my daughter, and I just think these kids are so sheltered. And I just think these kids are so sheltered, and I don't know if it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. So on the one face, you want them to have an experience that you potentially didn't have as a child growing up. And in the second phase, you want them to be strong and be able to do things for themselves. So, but then you don't want them to feel the pressure of burden of responsibility when it's not necessary. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think it's definitely a catch-22. And yes, the word connotates to being strong and having to put that pressure on you just naturally, just because of that word.
Right. And Farida, let me come to you. What does strong Black woman mean to you? Do you identify as a strong Black woman?
I identify as a lot of things. I've never really limited myself to defining myself as anything.
Okay.
And being a strong Black woman, for me, means that you are always on call.
Okay.
You have a sense of responsibility, not just for yourself, not just for your immediate family, but for society as a whole. Because people are looking up to you. You cannot afford to fail.
Okay.
And it makes you put a lot of pressure on yourself. It makes you get into a state where, although you feel like hiding in the corner of your room and crying, you do that But then when you get up and face the world, you wipe your tears.
Yeah.
Put on your makeup and face the world with a strong face. Yeah. It's not, I think we are afraid to show our vulnerability because of the perception that women are emotional, we are not logical and all that stuff. We think with our emotions and all that stuff. But I think we should know how to balance the two. Because we are not helping people by pretending as if everything is right. It's right all the time. Because what happens is that somebody sits in their home, look at Lexi, look at Farida, look at Caroline, and think that everybody should always have it together all the time. You and I know that it's not like that.
Like you both just said, it's not only making sure that you get things done, but as you're getting things done, the image you're presenting to the world. And I also sort of think of women and Black women as the people who set themselves on fire so that everyone else around us can be warm, right? And so definitely going through, as women, there are a lot of similar experiences we have when it comes to family. I'm currently looking, it's interesting that we'll be talking about it later on today, because I'm currently looking after a sick elderly mother. There's work stuff that needs to get done. There's husband, and then all of those things together, and making sure that in that process, I'm also taking care of Carol, right? And on a daily basis, I mean, I have moments almost every day where, I cry, and then I don't come out of my room looking like I've just cried, but I did. And I had a moment. I work with as an educational psychologist, I work with young women, young students, and I got to the point where I decided that I was going to be honest with them about some of the struggles that I had, because a lot of them would say things like, "Oh, Dr. Carol, you always look like you have it together," and I think that's one of the disservices that we do, in terms of younger girls, is that they look up to us and they always see us put together, doing things, and they don't see behind the scenes. They don't see that vulnerability. And I think, like Farida said, it's almost like...
Sorry, just to interject a little bit. Do you think that, like Farida said, we come out of our room and you have the lipstick on and you've wiped your tears and everybody sees you in boss mode? Because, I mean, that's been my theme this year, that this level up, slay, queen, slay, sometimes you just don't want to level up.
Too much.
So do you think that sometimes because we have that face on, it actually almost gives the perception that everything is okay.
That everything is okay.
With social media contributing to, you're not really going to post a picture of your bank balance.
No, you're not.
You're not really going to post a picture of when, although some people do it, some people cry on camera. I've never understood how people cry. Like when something tragic happens to them, you're actually crying that this, I'm like, but that was a whole intention to pick up your phone. Then, I mean, at what point did I don't get it. So I guess what I'm trying to say is, do you think that we contribute to that by wiping our faces and putting up the strong face for the younger girls?
We do.
Okay.
I think we do.
Are you saying that's not a good thing?
It's not a good thing.
Okay.
It's not a good thing, because if you think about the idea of setting yourself on fire so everyone can be warm, eventually you're going to burn up, right? Yeah. And I always tell people that the best thing you can do for the people you care about is to take care of you first, right? But we're not necessarily also socialized to think that way. We're socialized to put everyone first, make sure everyone is good, and then you somehow just keep getting things done. But I also think it's because we haven't been socialized to be able to be both strong and soft at the same time. And it's almost like the two are mutually exclusive. And it's like you can't be both. So I think it's we do it.
Okay, so I wanted to give an example of holding it together, holding that strength together till the very end. And I guess my personal experience was, losing my mother, and she had a 10-day stint in the hospital where there was a distance between, there were some days where she'll just say or like my aunties will tell me she's sleeping. Or some days I'd walk in the room and I knew my mom wasn't sleeping, but her head was like to the side, where she didn't want to see me in her weak. She didn't want me seeing her in her weakest moments. And then she died. So I was having and this is, it's definitely over 15 years or 20 years actually. And I still grieve not being able to be with her by her bedside and if we need to cry, let's say our goodbyes. And, my friend said to me, I have a son that you'll never understand what that, saving face is until you have a child, because you don't want your child to see you in your weakness. You remember her as this strong woman. But I'm like, to what end? Like, strong till the end? I mean, if you're going, why don't we, when it comes to like, even parents, when they're sick, they never tell you, most especially mothers, they'll say, don't tell your father. Or if something is happening, they'll say, don't tell this person. Why? What's the secrecy? And why do we keep holding on to this stupid strength is what I would call it. Can you speak to that, Lexi? Yeah.
So like I said earlier, I just think, just going from, your experience with your friend, I think a child should be exposed to, the whole, like the holistic view of a mother, of a parent or parents, just in order to prepare her for her own experiences. And like I said, like, I don't think it's right to hide everything from her. And yes, we want to be portrayed as the strong, Black, independent, all these acronyms. But, when you're sick or when you're vulnerable, to some extent, and depending on, the sensitivity of a child and how old they are, you want to educate them about certain things. And even, for example, if you had, for example, a cyst, God forbid, that could be extremely painful, right? So, and you have a daughter, you don't want to educate your daughter about these things and how to protect herself. And do you know, all because of your strength? No, I don't. I would disagree. So it just depends on the particular case scenario, really.
And Farida, what would you say to the strength, hiding your pain for children? Or do you think that you should start to expose them to some of the reality? I mean, based on the ages. What's your view on that?
Well, growing up, my mom never hid anything from us, and especially for me, because I was with her most of the time because I wasn't going to school. So when she had her bad days, I knew. When she had her good days, I knew. When she was feeling low, I knew, and all those things. So I wasn't sheltered in that regard. When she was sick, I knew she was sick and all that stuff. So there was no question of her pretending that things are not all right. So it made me. I think it made me a stronger person.
Okay.
Because then you realize that your parent is human.
Yeah.
They are not as godlike as
we try to project.
We tend to classify them as. And it helps you when you're growing up, because it makes you realize the aspects of their character you want to pick up, and the aspect that you don't want to pick up. And it makes you also appreciate that sometimes when they are in a bad mood or they are shouting at you or something, it's not you per se. It's because of
a combination of what they're going through.
Of what they are going through. So for me, I think it should be measured. The amount of information that you give your child. Of course, at the age of 2 or 3, I don't expect you to be telling your child about certain things. But as the child grows older, you should be able to measure the child's intellect and decide how much information you are going to give the child about yourself. So because my mom always told us everything from how she met my father, her boyfriend before then, and all those things.
Okay, mommy. Mommy's giving you the tea.
So I mean, there's nothing hidden in that regard.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you obviously appreciate her for that. Yeah. Well, that's good to know. So moving on to the normalization of it. We've talked about, okay, we shouldn't. I'll throw this to you, Dr. Carol. You're in school, so obviously you said that these girls come to you every time and they're like, oh, Dr. Carol, some people even come to you, you always look so pretty, you always look so this. You always, how do you normalize, especially because a lot of the learning that I feel happens out of school. There were some teachers that I did, look up to. How do you normalize these conversations? So how do we start to normalize them in places such as schools?
Well, number one, by having them more often than we do.
Okay.
Because the idea behind sort of demystifying something is sort of bringing it out from the shadows and sort of taking the secrecy and the things that's shrouded sort of away from it. So I think conversations like this, the more we have these conversations, the more the myth sort of starts to dispel. So just generally having more of those conversations and being as vulnerable and open as you can, be in those conversations, I think is a very important first step.
I think being strong, being resilient, being tough, those are all good virtues, but I think sometimes it might be a burden. It might feel like a prison when all you want to do is just cry it out, and instead of it being seen as you reaching your limit or you just not being able to take a certain situation anymore, it's now seen as a sign of weakness or you're too soft. And especially as Black African women, we have to be strong. We have to be enduring. And to me, I see it as, yes, you're accepting of pain and suffering. And personally, I can't do it. I can't do pain. I have a very low threshold of pain, and I don't think it makes me strong if I don't want to endure pain. So my idea of self-love is to know my limits, is to know when I can't take something anymore, is to know when something is not right and be unapologetic about saying, this is not right for me. I'm either going to walk away, I'm going to let you know that it's not right for me, and you have to deal with whether or not you can stop giving something like that to me. So that's how I practice self-love personally, and I think generally we all need to know, what we want out of life, what our limits are, what our ideal life looks like, so that you're actively creating that in what you're accepting, and most importantly, what you're not accepting out of life.
When people talk about strong Black woman, I look at it from different perspectives. I'm an African woman. I've never been in a position where I had to scream, hear my voice. I was raised to always have an opinion. I was raised to always say what I felt, but say it respectably so that the other person that I'm dealing with doesn't feel insulted. So from my own point of view, I will just say individuals have to be strong. But then if I grew up in America, maybe I would have a completely different ideology of what a strong Black woman should be, because I know, having to deal with oppression and suppression and always having to fight for basic rights, their conditioning and our conditioning here is completely different. So I would not say there is one way to look at what a strong Black woman should be, but I belong to the school of thought that everyone should have a voice.
I think strong Black woman is a very specific brand of strong woman. And I think there are historic implications about how Black women for generations have held up entire families, entire tribes, and that has been perceived as normal. And so there's a kind of generational passing down of that phenomenon in which to be a Black woman means you shoulder and you shoulder and you shoulder. There aren't any safe spaces to just break down, to cry, to say that I don't have it all figured out. But I feel like the tide is turning in our generation in particular, because more and more women are saying, I can't die. Even if my mother and her mother died, I can't, and are speaking to each other. There is a disease of silence that makes you feel like whatever it is that you're experiencing is just you. But the moment you speak to somebody else about it and they validate that, it's like you can't stop speaking at that point. So I recognize that it exists. I know what the dangers are, but I'm also hopeful about the idea that it won't always be that way, particularly because women are saying, enough now. We're tired,
What's self-care for you? Is it just doing nails? Farida, what does that mean for you, self-care?
It depends on my mood. Okay. Sometimes it is reading the trashiest novels. Sometimes it's traveling. Sometimes it's watching a good movie on Netflix. And sometimes it's just locking myself up in my house and not stepping out
for a few days.
Yeah. But I mean, once in a while I go for a spa treatment or whatever. But I don't really indulge that much because I don't really enjoy it as much as as you guys. Everybody is different. And I think when you talk about self-care, people immediately think about going to the spa, treating your body and all that. Self-care is about revival. It's about revival of your spirit, revival of your body, revival of your soul.
I like that angle. Okay, so Dr. Kyle, do you want to bounce off that? No, because I like the idea of the spiritual.
It's definitely
because I think we've been talking about the physical outer tiredness,
right.
And sometimes emotionally you have to detach from people who aren't renewing your energy,
right?
Yes.
So I know you have Thrive.
Yes.
Okay. So can you speak to that sort of renewal of the mind?
Right.
Because there's in part of self-care, I've been hearing a lot of mindfulness. What does that mean to renew the way you see things and how you handle people going forward?
I think the thing with self-care is, there are two sides to it. There's the feel-good, things that we've talked about, but a lot of people also don't realize that self-care sometimes involves doing the hard, dirty work of sort of getting into yourself, looking at the things that, like you just talked about, the things that you might need to do differently with regards to your relationships, learning to say no to things that don't serve you well, dealing with some of the toxic parts of yourself, because we all have parts that, if you've lived life a little while, you've picked up some things that, aren't helping you or your relationships. And all of that is self-care, right? So making sure that you're digging in deep and getting all of that stuff out so that you can generally be a more authentic, better person. And I think one of the things that we can do daily that, doesn't cost much, but is great for self-care is just checking in with yourself. And I think especially as women, we barely have time to do that, because from right when you wake up in the morning, it's go, 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 go. But finding a time in the day, either in the morning or at the end of the day, to just check in with Carol. Right? How are you feeling today?
And what does that look like? Do you look in the mirror and be like,
how you doing? Talk to yourself. Or some people write, or just basically communicating with yourself, checking in on yourself, to see how you're doing, to see the things that have bugged you during the day. And then you'll realize that there were things that bothered you, but you sort of let go or pushed it down just to keep moving. It's important that you get in touch with all of those things so you can deal with it and then move on. But I think self-care definitely has to be a balance of both doing all the wonderful things we talked about, but also making sure that you're keeping in touch with yourself, your spirit, your soul.
I'm actually chuckling because I actually said that I was having a lunch with a couple of friends last week, and was talking about like just emotions, and like I had a little tiny incident with my brother and I lost it a bit.
You had a moment.
I had a moment. And I just remember feeling like I hate the fact that I'm bringing out this emotion because you've enabled it out of me. Yeah. Like I felt so vulnerable afterwards thinking like, why did I get so angry? And why did I, not even just see me that way, but why did I allow you to bring that side of me? Do you know what I mean?
You could have checked yourself.
Right. And usually, I would usually take a step back and check myself and say, I'm actually going to lose it with you because you deserve it. Yeah. And that's okay. Like, I'm okay with that. But when you're not in control and you lose it and you're reflecting and you're just thinking, oh my God.
Yeah. I just want to summarize this first segment by talking about asking for help. And I'm going to allow you, finish this one. You said you saw your mother, over and over in her vulnerable states. Did you ever see her asking for help? And what sort of, at what points did she get to that she couldn't cope?
Well, my mother is a very spiritual person. So whenever she gets to that point, she goes in prayer. Okay. So that is how she deals with her
pain.
With her. Yeah. So when it comes to asking for help, I think we are conditioned not to ask for help. I mean, as soon as you hear somebody is going to see a psychologist, you immediately brand the person as being, mentally, whatever. Because of the image we have of people with mental health issues, right? But I think it's about time we broke that thing and made it okay for people to realize that it's okay to need help. I mean, it's okay to want to go and talk to a neutral person because in our culture. You don't go and tell people your problems. I mean, how can you go and sit with somebody and tell them your problem? Because you are supposed to keep our problems to ourselves. You are not supposed to expose our dirty linen to the public and all those things. But the problem with that is that you're always talking to somebody who is not 100% objective. And no matter how much the person is your friend, or the person is your parent, or the person is even your husband or your loved one, the person always has, by all means, have an input in whatever decision you take, or will be affected by whatever decision you take. So no matter how objective the person wants to be, it's natural that, I mean, if you are with your child and you tell your child that I am going to go to take you somewhere and you can't do it, the child will be disappointed. So the child would by all means, even if you are sick, the child will still be thinking about the place that you told him or her that you're going to take them.
It's like there's a conflict of interest.
Exactly. Exactly. So with that in mind, sometimes I think we need to let people know that it's okay to have challenges in life which require you to talk to somebody. I mean, I know 3 people. I had a friend who committed suicide because of mental health issues. I have a cousin who had mental health issues, and I have another friend who had mental health issues. And it's like that you're tempted to say, snap out of it. I mean, what is your problem? I mean,
that's the typical African response. Get it together, snap out of it.
Exactly. Because it took a long time for me to actually sympathize with them. Because I'm like, I have this disability. There's nothing wrong with me mentally. How about more you
that you don't have any hindrances.
Yes. What about you? What is your problem?
What's your problem? Right.
But when my friend committed suicide, it made me realize that, wow, this is much deeper than I thought it was. So if you need help, ask for help. There's no shame in asking for help. Think about it like if you have malaria, you go to the doctor. So why didn't you go to a psychologist if you have something wrong with you mentally?
And I think that's a huge problem in Africa because we don't deal with emotional trauma.
No, we don't.
And
we sweep it under the carpet.
Yes.
We sweep it under the carpet.
I said that I only just discovered this last year, that losing both my parents before 14 was trauma, childhood trauma. I was like, did I go through trauma? We don't have time in Africa. Moving on. Like they don't, so years later you start having these issues, or I might be unnecessarily defensive, or I might be unnecessarily impatient because life for me is short and swift because everybody I have known has always died quickly. So with my goals, I'm impatient. With everything, I find myself being impatient. And that's coming from somewhere. So you're right in that if we don't deal with a lot of these emotional trauma, childhood trauma topics, because to the average African, they're just trying to eat and survive.
Exactly.
Yes.
So they actually don't have time to look inner. And it actually takes a lot more work. It's the alignment, it's the spiritual, and working on the inner to before the outer.
As you rightly said, I mean, if you wake up in the morning, your electricity is off, your water is not coming.
You take
now coming to think of therapy.
I'm not happy.
Who cares? Yeah. Absolutely. Well, that's a good roundup for this first segment. Thank you guys for your honest opinions. Well, that's all we have time for now. We'll be back after the break with the hot topic of the day. Stay with us.
I've been taking care of my 78-year-old mother for a few years now since her retirement. I'm the eldest daughter of my 3 siblings and the only one unmarried and without children. As the firstborn, my mom tends to call me when she needs anything, as I've always been the one to check on her and assumed responsibility where my other siblings slack. One of my brothers has a wife and 2 kids, the other has a wife and 1 kid, and my sister is a single mom with 1 child. My mother's expenses are recurring, miscellaneous, and never-ending. Her housekeeping, feeding, and healthcare costs are not cheap and generally expedient. She places the emotional burden on me and would default to me to lay complaints about everything. I love my mother, but it can get all overwhelming. When it comes to her cost, we have a monthly amount we contribute towards mum, and my brother with 2 kids gives what he can, and so does my sister. However, my other brother simply always says he doesn't have it. My mother spoiled him and enabled a lot of his poor behavior since he was her last son. He rarely ever contributes a near enough amount to what is apportioned. He simply avoids this responsibility because our mother lives in a different country. On top of this, he does not call or share any of the emotional burdens, and my mother complains how she doesn't hear from him. It's understandable that we all need a break now and then from a needy and aging parent. But what can I do about my younger brother's avoidance of responsibility? Over the last year, I have shouldered a disproportionate burden of my mum's care and have started to foster resentment amongst my siblings. The last one in particular does not appreciate or ask about the welfare of my mum and does not show gratitude for the care and time that we put in. He tends to have an attitude when there is some kind of pushback for his contribution. The financial burden ends up falling back on me because I am the one who doesn't have responsibilities, but that couldn't be further from the truth. I have student loans, bills, rent, and other expenses that are important. I truly believe that crisis reveals character, and I don't know how not to resent my brother for his behavior and communicate to him that my needs do count, and him avoiding responsibility deeply affects me. I know he buys new clothes, cares for his immediate family, and so why won't he care for his mother? He said I cannot dictate his priorities for his immediate family and that my mother's expenses are too miscellaneous and he simply doesn't have it. I'm tired of pretending to my mom that my brother is busy and ready to stop making excuses for him. Is it the right thing to do to continue protecting my mother's feelings and cover the fact that she has a selfish child caused by her enabling behavior? Is it appropriate to let my mother know the truth about her son, or am I being reactionary and acting out of my feelings? Is it realistic for parents to depend on the support of their children in today's world when it comes to their retirement?
Welcome back, guys. I'm sure that's not a unique story for some of you, but let's hear what our studio guests have to say. Dr. Carol, I'm going to start with you on this one.
Okay.
Can you speak to any part of the story that you relate to?
Okay. Well, I think interestingly enough, I'm in the process of what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. Not identical, but I have 2 brothers, and our mother is ill, mm-hmm. and we've come together to take care of her. Mm-hmm. And I think one of the things that stood out to me from the story was that it seems like they didn't have an agreed sort of split mm-hmm. in terms of who was going to be responsible for what and what was expected of everyone. So it mm-hmm. seemed like everything fell on her mm-hmm. because she's unmarried. Mm-hmm. She seemingly doesn't have any responsibilities. Mm-hmm. And if I remember correctly, she's the eldest. Mm-hmm. And so that those responsibilities fell on her, and she being the eldest also sort of automatically has taken on everything. But I think for me, she talked about the fact that, especially with regards to her youngest brother, who mm-hmm. seems to be the most disengaged from the situation, about how her mother had sort of enabled a lot of his, I'd call it childish, mm-hmm. Attitudes mm-hmm. by sort of allowing him to get away with everything. Yeah. And I also sort of think that if she doesn't address the issue, that's what she's also doing. She's continuing to enable him to sort of do the things that, he really shouldn't be mm-hmm. doing. And for me, I'm a big believer in having, straightforward conversations.
Do you think she sounds a little, ticked off at the moment? So I think those conversations have probably been had. Mm-hmm. And she's come to the point of frustration because how do you really tell a grown man? Mm-hmm. He's not a baby.
No, I mean, with her mother, I think, is what I'm saying, that she needs to, because she's sort of trying to shelter.
You would tell your mother?
I would tell my mother.
Okay.
I mean, okay. I would be very mm-hmm. intentional about how I tell her. Okay. But I think I would stop trying to shelter her from what is really going on. Because I think in doing that, I'm continuing to enable this relationship between mother and youngest son of sort of babying him and not.
So would you tell him that you're telling?
Yes.
Like, I mean, this just sounds like
yes, I
back
would.
in high school. I'm telling mommy.
I would.
Would you tell him that you were telling mommy? Because,
I would.
Yeah. So I think that might be, especially if she's frail.
Yes.
Or whatever. I think maybe the fear of
how
if he has a soul or spirit at all, that should really bring him to some kind of sense.
Yes, but I would tell him that I think I'm ready at this point to let mommy know all of what is going on. If it might turn him around, it might not. But if you're intentional about how you deliver the message, I think that can make a difference, because she can't go on like this. She's already she's resenting her siblings. Yeah. She's all of that is eventually going to come to a head at some point. Yeah. And sometimes what we don't realize is in an attempt to sort of to manage a situation, we sort of set it up for it to be worse, because eventually it's going to explode. And then mommy might find out everything that's going on in a not so pleasant way anyways. But it's definitely a dicey situation. It's difficult.
Lexi, can you speak to the sharing, the responsibility thing? Because I guess, like you said, if they had a conversation about how this was going to be shared, but then you could even have the conversation. And January, I said yes.
And then when it comes to
September, I don't have the money. I have school fees to pay. People change their minds and finances change. Can you speak to the assumption that because somebody is single with no responsibility, that she shouldn't pay an equal amount to what her siblings pay? Do you think that it's only fair that she, as the eldest, and maybe as the eldest, you know how we are in Africa, it's according to age. Right. So let's speak to her.
So I'll use my case, my own experiences. So I'm the youngest out of 5. And just naturally when they're contributing, they're all married, by the way, with kids. With the exception of me, I'm married. I'm single with a child. So when they're contributing, if everyone is bringing 10, I get to bring 5. Right? And I quite like that because they understand and they appreciate that I don't have the extra 5 from the other person to bring right? And it's fair in that sense. However, when it comes to other things like babysitting, they could just bring their kids to my house, whether I've asked, whether I've accepted, whether I haven't. And I'm just expected to look but when I'm going to my sister's house, I'm appreciated that her husband is there. So I would not just do that. It'll be pre-planned, it'll be organized, it'll be approved. They'll go through a whole process.
So you think that's an age thing and that's an African thing?
I think it's an African age thing. It's because we have that, because you're older, because I don't actually necessarily see culture. I don't necessarily see anyone else, out of our ethnic saying, because you're older, you must do X, Y, and Z. So no.
In terms of the African culture of taking care of parents, I was reading an article, there's one of these HuffPost articles that broke down a couple's earnings. And it was, maybe this person's earning 250, broke down all their expenses. And not one line item there had parental care. Now, I'm not saying people don't take care of their parents abroad, but when I looked at it and when I looked at what I wanted my wealth to look like when I got married, it was a very inspiring breakdown. I thought, this is nice, investment properties, good salary, savings, child education fund, her life was just set out straight. And I find that with African children and in Black culture, I don't even think it's African culture, we have a lot of responsibility to home that doesn't allow us to then own our homes or, thrive and kind of grow. And I don't think it's a fault of the parent. You do what you have to do. If your parents are sick, they've been there for you. But what I kind of want to address is the parents dictating how they're taken care of because they've suffered for you. Do you think that's fair, or is that something we kind of need to rethink how they demand?
So with regards to them dictating how you should look after them. Obviously, if your parent loves you, they should know how much you can spend. They should know your pocket. They should know that at the end of the day, they want you to be happy. And you stressing yourself out to buy them lavish or take care of them in a lavish manner, or beyond what you can afford, will not make you happy. So I think the whole thing is to have a frank conversation with your parents. Tell them that, look, mommy or daddy, this is how much I earn. This is what goes into my daily expenses and all that stuff. This is how much I can give you at the end of the month. And that is it. I mean,
at the expense of some of our African, African parents sometimes don't listen.
No.
They just don't listen.
I understand. But sometimes you have to make them listen.
Yeah. Okay.
You have to make them listen. You have to sit in front of them and tell them the truth. But this is how much I earn. And no matter how much you wish I could earn more,
This is it. I don't have it.
Yeah, this is my pay slip. So I cannot provide the certain things that you want me to provide. Luckily for you, I have other siblings. Let them also play their part in the whole thing. I blame the mother in the whole thing, story. Because mothers tend to pamper their boys.
Yes.
The same fathers pamper their daughters, but not African fathers. African fathers do not pamper their daughters the way African fathers pamper their sons. And that is a big problem. Because at least if our mother is not pampering us and our father is pampering us, then at least we are getting that from our father.
Fathers, yeah.
But the boys are getting all the money.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And it's not fair.
I don't know where we're getting these ideologies from, where our parents become burdens to us to care for them in old age. It's not going to be easy, but they made sacrifices to raise the people that we are. So the only thing we can do is they have very limited time with us. What we can do is do the best that we can to care for them. And if it's a burden to you, then discuss with your siblings and find a common ground. But I will never, ever approach taking care of a parent as a burden. It's my duty. They took care of me.
I think that situation speaks directly to this idea of a black tax, which is for your Caucasian contemporaries who they finish their schooling, they save their money, and they get to use that towards their lives. Us as black people, as Africans, culturally there's this idea that there's a reaching back. So you're taking care of your siblings, you're taking care of your parents, and so so if you have 10 and 9 has gone to the family, you have this small one that you have to put towards your own life. And the belief is that sets us back because we can't progress as quickly. In this particular family situation, and with all family situations, my firm belief is that no carpet hiding, no hiding any of the secrets, less dasi rough, as they say. So I suggest like a very big family sit down in which we discuss what is going to happen next. It's particularly difficult because this mother is of age and she's quite a bit older, and so you don't want to break her heart. But I feel like part of that fragility is what allows this behavior to persist. So you don't want to tell mommy that this is what's happening so she won't be upset. The end result of that is one person in the family bearing the weight of everything, which cannot work. So it is a conversation around what are the parents' expectations around, I've raised you, I've put all this stuff into your life, and now you must take care of me, and having no other safety nets for themselves, which I think is such a scary thing. But I think this family just needs to sit down and have a conversation in which she the person who's has the issue, says, this is what I can contribute, if anything at all. These are my own personal life goals and things that I'm saving towards. Yes, I'm single now. Maybe I want to have a family later. Maybe I want to start a business. And so because of that, I can give X amount a month towards the family fund. What can you bring? And then there has to be some real accountability about making that happen month to month, once a year, whatever it is. But they just need to have a conversation. And she has to be clear about her boundaries, as you have to be with all family, I find.
I feel for the lady, but it's also a very familiar trope. This is culturally how people expect to be taken care of in their old age by their children. And her having, to the world, she doesn't have the responsibility of a family. It kind of will fall on her. I think in this case, she needs to sit down with her siblings before she takes it to her mom, because there's no point unnecessarily burdening the mom with this. The mom just needs support, however she's going to get it, whoever she's getting it from. So I would say this lady should have a conversation with her siblings, and especially the one who's giving her this issue, But I would say she should probably get support from her sister and her brother who are supporting in this case, and then maybe they can all sit down and talk about it. And practically speaking, everyone needs to have a budget. The mom needs to have a budget of what her monthly expenses are like, so that there is no surprises every month. So they should all sit down with the mom and create her living expenses, and then everyone can feasibly see how much they can contribute. But I think going forward, this is what we need to do in our generation going forward, is taking care of our future now. These things are generational cycles that keep us in poverty, and I think it's up to us, if we're aware of what's going on, it's up to us to take active steps to break out of these kind of cycles. It's one thing that white people have over us, is that they're taking care of their future, whether it's with pension plans, it's with retirement funds, and we also need to start doing that now before you have children, so that you're not burdening your children or the next generation with your living expenses when you're no longer making a living wage. Because this is sadly what most people in my generation are dealing with. Some way or the other, they have to take care of the parents, which it's not realistic to say you can't, give money to your mom if she needs it. That's your mom. That's who raised you. You need to give money, but it's up to us to correct the mistakes, to learn from these mistakes and correct them in the future. So my advice to this lady is, I'm sorry. I mean, first of all, I'm sorry that you're in this position, but she also needs to be more vocal with the person causing the problem.
So I want to speak to the demanding, and I'm asking you, Dr. Carol, of how you can push back when you have a demanding parent. What is your pushback?
It's tough, right? Because especially in our culture where we've been sort of raised to, whether or not your parents were irresponsible or not, that's your father, that's your mother, regardless of it, you have to, and it's a hard mold for us to break out of. Yes. And like you said, a lot of times what also constrains us is this idea of what people are going to think. Right? Because
that you
like,
can't take care of your mother.
She has 3 children in the US, and look at what is happening to her, or she's gone and they've left their mother to live with an auntie. And so all of those things make us want to sometimes push ourselves to do things that, don't serve us well. And it's interesting because you are in at a point where now you are thinking of your life and building things for yourself, but you can't leave your parents just hanging. I think in order to push back, sometimes we almost have to say, okay, let whatever is going to happen. Because the thing I'm finding with African parents is they know what buttons to push, right? They know if I threaten a certain way, if I do what make them feel guilty.
You think they know they're callous in that way?
They know.
Okay.
And it's almost like they throw grown-up tantrums, right? To get what they want. And we also then quickly try and manage the situation because we don't want people to know, we don't want, and then we give in. Sometimes it might be worth thinking about, okay, if you say I'm going to leave and go and live with Auntie Akosia, go and live with Auntie Akosia. And I've encountered situations where people were firm enough to let that happen, and then they go and then they come back themselves, or then eventually realize, okay, I can't keep pushing my daughter or my son in this way because, it just isn't fair. But in order to push back, you almost have to be willing to be very firm and do stuff that might be uncomfortable for a little bit. But you have to find a balance of taking care of yourself and them. But it's definitely not an easy thing to do.
Because I think that I read this somewhere, and this is something that in my experience, my mother used to drum it in my ears as, I'm not expecting you people to take care of me in old age. She was ready for us to leave that house, as in be going so I can continue my life, because their lives stop for you. But I also think that the work of a mother becomes obsolete after a certain age. When your kids get to a certain age and they are ready to taste the world, they don't have time for you.
Right.
And I think it's prevalent in our culture not to prepare for retirement. I think we suffer so much and we're very paycheck to paycheck to paycheck to paycheck that we don't think enough about life after.
Right.
And delayed gratification is something that we don't talk about enough in our culture. Because if we do kind of talk about that, we're always just living for today.
Right.
Because even at 78, if you've invested well and you've done well with your finances, you really shouldn't have to put the burden on your children. But it's almost as if we live as a culture to rely on that assistance from your children when you grow older. And I guess the summary of that is, where do we break that culture, which is the pushback? Is that, would you say that's unanimous what we need to do?
We need to, and like you rightfully said, we also then have to start to break that mold of being short-term oriented, right? And preparing as much as we can for retirement, right? We have to start looking at things like invest long-term investments and things that will pay off in the long term, healthcare, as opposed to, like you're saying, things that bring us gratification immediately.
So in summary, are you guys voting that this girl tell her mother or just charge it to the game?
Totally have a frank conversation.
You think she should tell her mother?
Yes. Have a
Sick
frank
and all?
conversation.
Yes.
Sick
Oh,
and all.
wow. Would you?
I mean, it's not going to kill her. It's not going to kill her. It's not like it's...
That you spoiled him as a child.
Yes.
And it's about time he grew up.
Yeah.
And started being...
So she lived with that for the rest of her days. She's 78 though.
No, I mean, it won't kill her.
Yeah.
I won't.
Well, I hope not.
I won't.
I think what may happen is that then you force the mother to have a conversation with the son. A long overdue conversation with the son. And
Yes, because that's his mother too. And she shouldn't have to mediate the relationship between the two of them. And depending on how she can deliver a very strong, firm message in love still, but deliver it very strongly and very firmly. She'll be hurt, yes. But it might be something she needs to deal with before she goes.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for your honest comments and opinions. Now, guys, you've heard that. When it comes to sharing responsibility, let's try and be considerate of others. And parents, let's not be as demanding as we are with our children's money. If you would like to join the conversation, you can use the hashtag #CheckChatLive. Follow us on all our social media platforms. Until then, I'll see you next time on Check Chat Live.